Well, welcome everyone to the Religion Unplugged podcast and show, which is your regular plug-in for all of your religion news and culture. With me today, first, I am Joseph Holmes, filmmaker, film critic, podcast host of The Overthinkers, and regular culture critic for Religion Unplugged. And with me today, I have Rachael Alenxanda, good friend, YouTuber, and animator. Anything else I left out? You want Comedian. Oh wow, that's a Jewish comedian. That's so rare.
I know, there's so many. Well, I always say that because usually the YouTuber and the animator parts don't really communicate that I'm funny, quote unquote. So especially when I'm like going to conventions and stuff like that, people don't really know what to expect. Gotcha. So if I add that on my title, then people are like, "Oh, she's a comedian. I get it. Yeah. It's funny." So it's not like a brag.
You have to tell people that because otherwise people won't laugh. Yes.
Yeah, if I just throw out sarcasm, then people are like awkward because it's convention and sometimes social anxiety. Exactly. So it's just a billing thing that helps me have less work for myself at the end of the day.
No, totally makes sense. Well, very glad to have you on today. So we are going to be discussing aspects of Judaism and the new movie, that partly in connection with the new movie that just came out on Netflix. You're So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, which is an Adam Sandler movie, which is Adam Sandler and his daughters and his wife, apparently, I found out, all in the movie, a family affair. And it's going gangbusters on Netflix. And I was reviewing the movie and I realized I don't know all of the things about Judaism in the modern day, and so I reached out to some of my Jewish friends and was like, "Hey, what's real here, and what makes sense to get that part of the experience?" And I asked Rachael if she'd be willing to sit down and have a conversation with me about it as well, for all of your benefit and my benefits. So thank you so much, Rachael, for doing this.
You're welcome. I guess it's free therapy at the end of the day, so.
we can always use more of that.
That's why I kind of wanted, we were running a lot behind schedule because Joe forgot to tell me this was on camera, so I had to go get ready, put my makeup on and stuff like that, and it was stressful because the women will know, the cis women and anyone who identifies as that, who uses makeup, I didn't use my usual primer. So for makeup, you put primer under your foundation so the blending helps.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, I'm just explaining it to the audience.
Gotcha.
And so it was caking really bad on my face, and I had to kind of it took me longer than usual for those playing at home. But you can Google what caking is. But I had to get a hand cloth and wash it off and reapply, and it was a lot.
Well, we appreciate it because we get the benefits of your wonderful face as well as your wonderful thoughts.
Yeah, he's trying to get my ego to make me feel better. I can see right through him, unfortunately.
Is it working?
So, no.
Okay, all right.
Well. When you try to do that, you're very out of character, and so it bothers me.
But I'm doing it in a different voice, so clearly I'm not intending to fool you. It's part of the bit. So does that help?
You're not an actor, my dude.
It's funny.
Yeah, I know, but your performance doesn't sell me. What can I say?
Okay, well, fair enough. All right. It's a tough crowd. All right. So, first, just some introductory things. This movie, of course, is focusing on, Adam Sandler, his family, his Jewish family, and his daughters as the stars, particularly one of them who's having their first bat mitzvah, and the drama that's going on in high school surrounding that. But it is, of course, very specific. Well, let's start with this. What is, for people who don't know, what is a bat mitzvah? How is it different from a bar mitzvah? And what is involved in that?
Okay, so basically, we talked a little bit of this about pre-movie, and then to kind of get it out of the way, and then during the movie I was like, oh, there's some slang and stuff, so there was some just some Yiddish mostly that was in there that I had to translate for the goys playing at home, but it's like a coming of age thing, so think of like a quinceañera or a Sweet 16, but for Jewish kids. And specifically, it's more culturally embedded with a ceremony than just a party. So it's not just the party. There's actual work involved. So traditionally, you will learn several the idea is you're leading the congregation officially because you're a man or a woman. So I'm trying to think all the things off the top of my head. Ooh, there's a lot. So the general idea is you are assigned a Torah portion based on the time of your bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. Let me get to that. So bar is male, bat is female, b'nai is 2 people. So for bigger congregations, usually they will pair 2 kids up just because they don't have enough Saturdays to accommodate everyone that's having a mitzvah date.
That makes sense.
So it's usually b'nai mitzvah of family 1, family 2, and they do the parties separately.
Gotcha.
So I went to a big synagogue when I was growing up. We went to the temple, TM. It's not actually TM, but I always say that because it's just called the temple. For those who are interested in film history, it was the film used in Driving Miss Daisy. Nice. With Morgan Freeman and Driving Miss Daisy. So it's historically famous. It's been around since I think the 1860s. And it was also, during the civil rights movement, it was the synagogue that was bombed by the KKK. Wow. No one was hurt, but it was from my understanding, it was a very not very successful attempt. It was more of an inconvenience than anything. But from my understanding, this temple's always been supportive, and also like the city has been supportive of them just trying to, because it's like, it's like a big deal. Because it's a famous synagogue.
Absolutely,
it's not just another synagogue. Anyway, so it's a big synagogue. It's like the synagogue in Atlanta. So quote unquote. So that's where we went, and we lived for like 45 minutes. So we had to drive in every Sunday to go to Hebrew school. But when I say Hebrew school, it's not. It's about the teachings of based on the unit. There was a lot of like for the little kids, they learn the basic prayers, which was discussed in the movie. Like the prayer of the wine and the bread and the lights, the Shabbat lights, which are usually 2 singular candles. I'm a little rusty on my Jewish culture, so bear with me while I think.
No worries.
And then as you get older, you learn about the holidays. The holidays is also a young thing. So there's Shabbat, which is every Saturday. It takes place from Friday night when the sun goes down to Saturday night. And so the bar mitzvahs or the bat mitzvahs or the b'nai mitzvahs usually take place Saturday morning. So usually they greet the rabbi or the cantor. The cantor is the singing one. The rabbi is like the head one. We'll greet the congregation with Shabbat Shalom. So that was also discussed in the movie. So that's what Shabbat is. So that's the most common one because it happens every week. And then for Orthodox Jewish people, that's where the literal taking of the Torah stuff, as far as making sure you walk instead of drive, making sure you don't use lights, making sure you don't work. That's what Shabbat is. That's why you'll see Orthodox people walking to synagogue Friday night because they can't drive, because that's considered work.
Oh, I was gonna say, so you have bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. And so bar mitzvah is the one people have heard most often if they've heard of it, because that's the one for men, which was done much since the 14th century, probably around that, if I recall correctly. And then it was only, later that bat mitzvah, women got to do that as well. And so we're coming of age. Okay, you're now a man, you're now a woman, like you said, like the Sweet 16 or others that are done. And a big part of it is reading from the Torah, doing things, going through certain ceremony and rituals that prove, okay, you can do the things that are expected of you as a part of the Jewish community. which you're now a part of. And so there are things like that. We'll get into maybe some of what the others are, but like there's reading a portion of the Torah, which is very interesting based on when you were born. That's a very interesting angle.
That's called the Haftorah. The
Haftorah. Okay, yeah. Great. And but then also, and as part of the teaching, you have to go through. You were telling me yesterday, you have to go through an extended time of sort of practice and teaching to go through that, and an extended, particular intense period of teaching of doing that just before you're going to have your bat mitzvah, but throughout your growing up period, you're going to have on Shabbat, which is which is Saturday, like Sunday services for Christians. It's like you'll have like extended like Sunday school throughout your growing up years to get to be taught about the religious teachings. So
from my understanding, Joe, you can jump in, like Christians would have this like service and then Sunday school after, correct?
Sometimes it's before and sometimes it's after.
Okay. So for us, Sunday school is it's only school. So usually it's like the women go off to lunch. My mom would always go to lunch with her Jewish friends while we were in synagogue or we were in Sunday school. We learned about upcoming holidays. As you get older, it's more, religious, analytical discussions of Torah portions or Torah stories.
So now we alluded to this, the different, that there are obviously, just like there are different Christian denominations and different, sects of whatever religion you're a part of, there's different sects of Judaism that do this somewhat differently. You referred to the Orthodox, and you yourself you were saying Reformed.
I'm Reformed by culture and by bringing up. I don't really know where I am right now spiritually, but like at least I'm culturally Jewish.
You're not alone in that.
That's not like a common trope for Jewish people or anything.
It's not just Jewish people. Again, like all of the religious trends in America are the nuns, NONEs are growing. I don't know what I am. So yeah, you're in large company. But say, let's say your upbringing was Reformed, and
correct.
Would you say that the movie was also like a Reformed sect of Judaism?
Oh, for sure. We were discussing this during the movie, but we were even like, I figured it out like very early on in the movie, but the setting of the movie had to be a setting where there were culturally a lot of Jews already, Jewish people, a higher population because there were a lot of local bar mitzvahs bat mitzvahs or whatever based on the population of this city. So it had to be like it was probably somewhere in Florida if I was going to take a guess.
That makes sense.
So
just like again, like your Jews are a minority in America, but just like all minorities, there's places where it's where that's lots of people here are congregate together as Jews or Koreans or something like that. Yeah. So that's definitely telling. That's a good point that they are in a large Jewish community there. But so what for the audience? How would you describe what Reformed tradition of Judaism is and how it is different from other Jewish traditions?
So in contrast to general Christian, theologies or different branches of theologies, the Jewish branches are basically just how literally you take the teachings of the Torah or the teachings of what those stories tell you. So Reform are basically like, we're here, we're vibing. Like they just kind of like it's about community and learning that stuff, but everyone is kind of has their own interpersonal struggles with it. And that's just kind of the nature of the Jewish people. Like sure. I always, use the comparison. I think the Jacob story is the Jacob's fight, like literally fighting with God. Yeah. And they use that that's common to use as a comparison. Reform is the most laid back one, I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the middle is conservative.
Yes.
So I'm not I can't really speak on that.
Sure.
That's just the middle one. And then Orthodox is the the most literal one.
Yeah.
So, they keep kosher. It affects how they dress. It affects, what they
Right. You said like they literally don't drive because
they have 2 kitchens in their house usually, so they can eat there's a big commandment about not boiling a calf in its mother's milk, so that affects a lot of like their home life and making sure things are kosher.
That makes sense. And you have, generally speaking, people would say, okay, the Orthodox is more conservative and the Reformed is more liberal, but mostly it's referring to conservative as being very literal in your interpretation, and Reformed as being, we're more flexible, more, Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
It's like a range. It's like
It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
So, okay, that makes sense. So going broad here, we had some of this discussion the other day, but in the movie, what would you say are some of the things that stood out to you they referenced that resonated or didn't resonate with your experience? And for people who haven't watched the movie, like this will be a good thing for you to watch the movie and watch this discussion afterwards. For some of this, you'll pick up more of that.
Right. Can I start talking about like how I feel about the movie? Is that the appropriate point of the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely an appropriate point.
So Joe and I both hated the movie.
There were some good things about the movie.
There were good points of representation, but
some jokes landed, but not most of them didn't.
Most of them didn't. The protagonist was very unlikable. I know that was the point of the movie, but it just like to the point of we didn't really want to spend time with this person.
Yeah.
And that could have been something that was fixed in the editing bay. They could have cut a lot of that down, but I think they just they had to keep. We think there might be some nepotism involved in the production of this movie. I feel it's safe to say because it's Adam Sandler's family. I'm not sure if Joe checked the credits, but my hunch is that the daughter of the star of the movie wrote this script.
She didn't write the script.
She didn't write the script?
No. It's they got real professionals who've written other things to write it.
Okay, well, anyway, she's doing the best she can, but maybe she doesn't have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff and this was her kind of first big movie. And I think if she wasn't a Sandler, then she probably wouldn't have got the part, is fair to say.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where there's a whole conversation in Hollywood Hollywood going around in Hollywood about like Nepo babies, it's like, and it's like, it's not like, look, the fact that so many of the stars that we have right now that are related to other stars, that is not a coincidence. It's easier in any profession to get a job in the profession that your family has been. That's always been the way it's been.
Yeah.
And so, some of these, like his daughters got, first started in working in his movies, apparently, like Hubby Halloween, which I didn't watch, they were doing that. And so, obviously, I'm sure that's some of that's going around. And, Adam Sandler has always been a guy who's been kind of touch and go with his movies and their quality. And so it's not a surprise that a movie that is under his brand might have the same problems. And, especially a lot of it seems like she's trying to do the same. They're trying to do the same jokes the way Adam Sandler did. We were talking about the other day that, Adam Sandler has a very particular kind of style of character that he does that's kind of unlikable, but he kind of makes it work. And so there is a sense in which maybe she should try to find her own style of comedy that isn't just kind of like her dad's. But
right. I want to make another comparison before we move on.
Of course.
So I don't know. So animation, for those who playing at home, is kind of my forte. And Adam Sandler did an animated movie with his production team called Eight Crazy Nights.
Yeah.
And it suffers from a lot of the same problems, but in Eight Crazy Nights, it's much more exaggerated. Like the core story is beautiful.
Right.
The animals defecating everywhere.
Right.
Animated, really mess up the tone of the core of the serious story that they're trying to tell.
Yeah.
But so my guess is Adam Sandler is like, it'd be funny if we have all these natural animals defecating because it's like a Disney movie, except not really.
Right.
And then the animators are like, okay, you're paying us, and they do it, and he might not understand how that is messing with the tone of the serious story that he's trying to tell. So it's kind of like that in here, but on a much minor level, but with the pacing and like with awkward decisions.
Yeah, we were talking about, I mean, it's like, it's like the movie takes a long time to get going with lots of slow-mo shots. So
can we talk about the slow-mo of the crush guy? It's like
long slow-mo shots of like how gorgeous this 13-year-old boy is that she's crushing on. And like, in a normal movie, you would do like, oh, here's like one scene like that. That's kind of funny and like, oh, okay, you get it. She has a crush on him. But it like happens like 5 other times.
Yeah, we're not exaggerating. Like 4 or 5 other times. I'm just like, okay, like enough, guys. Like, rule of 3, guys.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it's definitely like again, it's there's a lot of fun stuff in there that I like. There's some jokes that really work, and there's a sweet kind of story that's at the heart of it. And oddly enough, for like the stuff that's the family themselves, like Adam Sandler and his daughters, kind of like interacting with each other is some of like the best stuff. But some other kind of contrived plotty stuff doesn't really work, which is very much like an Adam Sandler movie.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't like Adam Sandler can make really good movies if he wants to, or if someone else is doing the heavy lifting. Like Hotel Transylvania is is a fun series, but he's not doing the heavy lifting. He's not doing the heavy lifting Jendy Tartakovsky is, also a Jewish person. Ooh.
Right. No, and the Uncut Gems, he was great acting in Uncut Gems. He did, really good early work with like, Happy Madison and stuff like that. And even I don't even hate the murder mystery movies on Netflix. They're fine, but yeah, no. So it's just, but it seems like some of the lesser good tropes were kind of put into this movie, unfortunately, because there's really good stuff in there.
Right. Well, because there's kind of like the George Lucas vibes of because it's his own production studio. People are hesitant to give him direct feedback and honest feedback because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It becomes very insular.
Yeah.
So on the sort of Jewish representation level, what were some things that stood out to you about the movie that were like, oh yeah, I recognize that, they got that right, or that maybe not that?
I think our favorite part of it of this crud fest, I'll say that because that's what it is. Like at the end of the day, like you don't want to watch this movie if A, you don't have any patience, or B, at least watch it with friends that can riff on it with you.
Yes.
Because like Joe and I both said, like if we weren't watching this for this assignment, then we both would have turned it off just because the protagonist is so unlikable.
Yeah. And
like some of the things are just like there's a conversation about like female farting, essentially. I don't want to be too crude on the professional podcast, but that is a plot point in the movie.
Yeah, that gets repeated multiple times.
This is painful to watch.
And I was like, I did look up. I said, okay, was this written by men or women? And it was written by women and directed by women. So it's like, okay, well,
can confirm. Like, no one wants to talk about that. I think I said it once as a joke in high school, and everyone cringed. So then I was like, we're never going to talk about it again. So like, maybe the Gen Zers are more open about it, but like,
yeah. So we'll see. Again, it's got like 99% on Rotten Tomatoes.
How?
So yeah, but yes.
Okay. So our favorite part was Sarah Chavez from SNL is the rabbi in this movie.
Yeah.
And she had a song that she improv'd about God being. Can you give context to that scene, Joe?
Yeah, so this is really cool. This can lead into the next part of our discussion, because there is a scene in there where the rabbi is helping to helping the students who are getting ready for their bar and bat mitzvahs to get ready get ready for that. And so she's doing Jewish school with them, and suddenly all of the students raise their hands, or are like, one after the other, and being like, "Hey, what about God and this horrible thing that's happening in the world? Like climate change, or like disease." And somebody's like, "Hey, what about God and like gay people?" And just all of the the hardest questions, for that. Like every pastor is like, "Oh man," even like in Christian school, it's like, "Oh no, this is going to be a fun one to talk about." Yeah, and all at once, and then the rabbi's like, "Those are really good questions, and I will answer with a song." And she just goes, "God is random. God is random." And I'm just on the floor laughing because I recognize that, that whole cringy, figuring out how to answer those questions as, growing up in church. So that was something that resonated with your experience.
Well, yeah, that is a good segue. Good job. So I had a pretty negative experience growing up Jewish. A lot of times, hence why this movie was kind of hard for me to watch, because the protagonist is invested on her own to want to do her bar mitzvah, but there's some bad takes that are kind of subtexted in here that might be relevant to discuss just in the general Jewish community, or put it that way.
Sure.
Basically I had a negative experience because I was been mitzvah with my brother Josh, and I did have an out to not do it, but because it was with my brother, I kind of really didn't have an out, because if I chose to out the bar mitzvah or the bat mitzvah, it was the b'nai mitzvah, whatever.
Right.
So then I would just kind of be on the side where there was a whole, big party for him, and everyone's like, all the family friends are like, "Why isn't Rachel having a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah?" Excuse me. And I'm just like, fun fact, who's on my bar mitzvah cake? Kim Possible.
Oh gosh. Good taste. Well, so that is interesting. So we did discuss this the other day. So there's a couple of points to bring up with this.
Right.
But and this is something that's interesting again for people who are even not Jewish, who are all part of religious communities and stuff like that, is that one of the things is, unlike say, a modern day version of a Sweet 16 or something like that, the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah situation is really about the individual, but it is also really about the community. And they bring this up in the movie. There's a scene where Adam Sandler is saying when you are, in temple, you are saying before God and the community that I am a part of this. And so there is this idea of look, we're a Jewish community, and that is important for the community. We have a stake in this as a community. It's not just about you, it's about us. We have a stake in this, and we want you to learn how to, do the Torah. We want you to learn how to do all these things so that you can, for us in the community, not just for you. And so there is that tension of, it's well, maybe I don't want to do this. It's well, but you have to do this. And that's a part of this. And, I, again, as somebody who's a Christian who's a part of, religious community myself, I sort of see both sides of this. On the one hand, I don't like everything that my churches do. And I, and there's things about it that I don't like, and there's things I want to push back on that they do. And there's stuff I'm like, I'm an individual. I want to do things my way. On the other hand, we're not just individuals. We're also parts of communities, and our communities have a stake in who we turn out to be, particularly if we want to be a part of their community. And one of the things Jews have been a lot better at than us Gentiles have for a long time.
Goys.
Yes. Saturdays are for the goys. Has been being able to have a robust community that can last over time, even as a minority. And it's partly because they are really good at saying the community matters, not just the individual. How do you interact with that as a Jewish person in the Reformed community sort of not, kind of sort of figuring yourself out now. How was your experience of that attempt to find that balance?
Well, it's very subjective based on the individual, but I think it's something that Jewish communities should have more honest conversations about because, like, I've seen accommodations being given for maybe disabled Jewish kids who, like, maybe instead of reading the Torah, they're reading kind of like usually in the Jewish prayer things, they have the Hebrew and then they have like English pronunciation of the Hebrew, so people joining can kind of play along, and then they'll have the translation. So they'll have those three things.
Gotcha.
So I guess the advantage of the bar mitzvah part is you can start reading the Hebrew and following along with the Hebrew because you know the Hebrew well enough to do that. So that's kind of the incentive. And it's a unifying thing that you can, like, they've pitched it in the past, and you can go to anywhere in the world and they're saying the prayers like that, because it's in Hebrew. So there's not like a language barrier thing. Like if you would go to a Christian, like a Christian place in Spain, they'd be doing the prayers in Spanish,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's kind of like that part of it. But the other part, especially. And also,
I'll even say, like, there's a lot of biblical scholars who I've, read who are like, look, understanding if you actually like take the Bible seriously, being able to understand it in its original language is like a huge benefit to like doing that better.
Yeah, it's the same thing of like learning English, because English is like a very descriptive language, and it's kind of just a universal, like, anyway. So it's just, especially as we get on more of like the LGBTQIA minority gets vocal about this stuff, where especially the trans community, because bar and bot and b'nai, it's all gender specific. Yeah. Like that's a lot of pressure to put on a 13-year-old, especially if someone of that age maybe might not be comfortable with their gender, as an example. So I think we need to have, like, to the Jewish people listening, I think we need to have more honest conversations if the bar mitzvah process, bar as in the general bar mitzvah process, is right for the individual, because it might not be, or there might need to be accommodations. Like mine was incredibly stressful and hard, and I didn't have the privilege, or not privilege, even the convenience of learning the prayers via song. So usually what the process is, the cantor, the singer will record all the prayers for you directly. So you can practice at home. So it's like an MP3 track that you've just listened to over and over again. I didn't have that privilege. So I had to read the Torah.
Nice.
I did hard mode because
that's a good way to put it. So
God said directly, "Suffer, Rachel."
So you had, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's like part of the Jewish tradition is to make reasonable accommodations to individuals, and like, again, even the process of becoming reformed is
it should be. I'm not sure if that's something that's, I don't really keep up with this kind of thing, so I'm sure there are conversations happening about this kind of stuff, but I think we need to be more open about having them.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I would say, like I said, if the part of the tradition is figuring out, again, even like just the whole idea, even if you're Orthodox, like the idea that is having a car driving or not, like having those, is like, that's a thing, that a conversation that didn't happen until cars were invented. Right. And so as certain things happen, you can figuring out different ways to accommodate individuals, stuff like that. That is a conversation, at least to your point, that should be being had.
Okay, I wanted to say, like, to kind of generalize this, because I have a point to generalize this. So the one of the big Jewish beliefs is saving life, and life is precious, and that kind of rises above all belief. So that was a big thing. I just watched, like when it came out, the Anne Frank story from Meep's perspective. Meep was her caretaker, called A Small Light on Disney Plus, and that was a big thematic point of it. And so that's just kind of like the general caveat. So, I think at the end of the day, if we want the youth to be involved in the bar mitzvah process, bat mitzvah process, b'nai, whatever your pronouns are. There needs to be more honest conversation about, A, if it's right for the individual, and B, if they want to do it of their own volition, they're not being pressured by their parents. So rabbis go take the children aside and be like, hey, are you doing this? Is it your party or is it your parents' party? That's an important question.
Sure.
And just say, okay, well, like there might be, the other thing too is there might be disability concerns. I'm sure the Orthodox community has more experience than this, but like even now that I work with a lot of autistic people in my work, because it's a lot of animators and that correlates, and there might be extra hard things that maybe the parents are aware of for maybe autistic reasons. And so kind of making them go through trial by fire, even if they get to sing it, the whole process can still be challenging.
Sure.
And,
so
what, go ahead.
Is there a line, because you were talking about legitimately, hey, there needs to be accommodations made to the individual. Is there a line where you would see it might go too far in that way, where it's like, hey, an individual wants this, but it's not best for the community?
Oh, yeah.
Is there a situation you can imagine where that would be the case?
I have a direct example of that.
Oh, okay, great.
So my direct example is, I won't name names, but I went to a bar mitzvah on a cruise where the child's parents paid for the rabbi and his wife to go on the cruise so he could have his bar mitzvah. And he read the bar mitzvah. He did his bar mitzvah be reading translated Hebrew on a piece of paper over the Torah. I don't think he did any prep work for it.
Gotcha.
Frankly. Or if there was prep work, it wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
So that's when it stops becoming about the process and it becomes an excuse to go on a cruise with the rabbi.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's a great example.
Yeah, so I think for those educators who are playing at home, I think it's important to include maybe counselors from school or teachers in the process of this, if they feel comfortable reaching out, just to get a read on the child, to make sure they have the full picture before, approaching those kind of conversations is my recommendation.
Sounds great. Okay, so now getting into the more explicitly like religious aspects of Judaism that were brought up in the movie. So we talked about the God is random bit as being one part that we both really enjoyed.
The only part, but continue.
Laughter. I enjoyed other parts of it, but it's definitely one of the ones that stood out most. Is talking about how Judaism deals with certain theological questions versus often many Christian communities. Because again, I was surprised how much explicit talk about God there was in this movie, because usually, again, when I watch movies sort of about Jewish culture and Jewish, she those are kind of left to the side, except for one joke here and there, Woody Allen movies and stuff like that. And so what was interesting, she, like you were saying, she does a "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret" thing of praying and talking to God in the stories. But then specifically, the scene we're talking about, they bring up the issue of okay, how do you reconcile a good God that's supposed to be worthy of our worship with the suffering that you see in the world? And so growing up in the Reformed communities, how was that question addressed?
Right. I mean, the movie presented, let me just say for the record, the movie presents it pretty fair and pretty accurately as far as Reform. So, but I think in the scene, I'll just start talking about this stuff because I can.
Of course.
But in the scene that we just talked about the God is random, I was sure, and I think I said this, they're going to do some kind of Holocaust thing. They're going to make that a beat. But they didn't. They saved the Holocaust beat for when Adam Sandler is yelling at his daughter to make sure she does the bar mitzvah, and that is the highest form of Jewish guilt is bringing up the Holocaust. Let me tell you, there's a great song from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend where it's in a bar mitzvah, and like it's a song, but during the bar mitzvah they're like, I don't want to bring up the Holocaust, but like remember the Holocaust, remember how much we suffered. The song is called "Remember That We Suffered." So in a bar mitzvah, it's like, so it's a great day, but remember that we suffered.
Wow.
So that was handled much better, but so I know that we suffered. I did my own personal suffering for this religion, but I think we need to stop. Like, I think Jewish people maybe, like, that's what I meant by the individual stuff, is like trying to not make it so much of a statement for the non-goys and do it for ourselves and our family and our community. And if it's not right for the individual for whatever reason, then not to guilt trip them into doing the bar mitzvah.
Sure. No, fair enough. So like you're right. Like they didn't bring up the Holocaust there, but in the discussion about God and suffering, you were talking about the fact that before the Holocaust becomes front and center with
exactly. Because Joe and I talk about, we're friends in real life, so we talk about this all the time. So I use the Holocaust as kind of like we don't have Jesus as our personal buddies. We just have Jesus as kind of like another preacher in our many line of preachers.
Right.
Like Joe even asked if Jewish people have saints, and I'm like, no, we got got God, and we got the angels. Prophets. Yeah. And we got the prophets. That's about it.
Yeah.
And we got some famous rabbis who have some good and bad takes. That's about it.
Yeah.
So we have Old Testament God. We have the one who punished us for making the golden calf. So we always joke that God went through, if Jesus was really God's son, then he probably went through some character development along the way.
Sure.
But then so we kind of take it in strides, but just like the Holocaust is so viscerally like part of recent history that it's hard to be like, oh, we're doing okay. I always think of that Family Guy scene of just like the Jewish people building the pyramids, which that didn't happen.
Right.
But for the sake of the joke, they were doing that. And just like us Jews are getting our hard suffering out of the way early. We got it from here,
What was it? Jon Stewart once did he was like, this is every Jewish holiday. They tried to kill us, but they didn't get all of us. Let's eat.
Yeah, that's correct. Eating is like a huge part of Jewish culture. I love Jon Stewart. Come on my podcast, Jon Stewart, please. We can talk about Jewish things and our shared trauma. Anyway, continue.
But anyway, so the Holocaust. We talked about this off camera before, but is. It is that question of like, okay, well, how could God be good? It is the ultimate expression of how could God be good and allow all this suffering, and particularly suffering towards people that he says, is his chosen people.
Yeah, recent memory is the big thing.
And so how is that discussed or like reconciled, or that you've seen? How do they have that answer of, is it like just literally what they do and there's like God is random, we don't know? Or
I got this. Well, I can speak from my experience growing up, and then I can speak to my personal experience. So I'll do the first one. I'll do the growing up first. So growing up, just like I have a German team member on my production team, and we talk about this pretty openly, but like I always have to preface like, don't just tell people on the internet without any context that you're working for the Jewish lady for free on the internet. As a German, but we get Holocaust education drilled into us, unfortunately. Like, I think they have Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the temple would do some kind of project usually for Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I feel like I've been to another one, but I've done a lot of my own educational stuff about like everyone like in their mom's heard of Anne Frank, you know, and it's just like, it can be, it's draining, you know, it's a lot, like, to hear about that every year and to have to do a personal project. Like, I've had personal projects where I've had to write a story from a real life child's point of view about dying in the Holocaust. As a like a 10 or 11-year-old, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So, you know, and like, there's like choose your own adventure Holocaust edition books out there.
Really?
From my memory, I could be wrong, but I remember like getting assigned, like, that's how I wrote the story, as I'm just like, you know, like, to kind of emphasize how close, like, people might not have made it. So, written by Jewish people.
Sure.
Preface that. But, you know, it's just like, but me personally, at the point, I'm kind of like, I get it. Like, I get it. Like, I'm not going to forget. Like, I got this. So, I think Spielberg has the best policy about, like, making sure that people tell their stories and to archive them and to just cause awareness. But, like, Spielberg got to do Schindler's List and then kind of put a pin in it. Yeah. Emotionally. But, you know, there's sometimes the general Jewish population doesn't get that artistic kind of like, okay, I've done my time. Yeah. But the other criticism I'll have before we move on about this is, like, I know everyone's heard of Anne Frank. I thought my phone was off, but anyway, I thought everyone's heard of Anne Frank. We've all heard it. We've seen the story. There's an anime of Anne Frank. There's a live action Anne Frank. There's an French animation of Anne. Like we get it. So I think in general, we have to start talking about more stories that aren't just Anne Frank. Sure. I think Anne Frank is kind of a little bit oversaturated at this particular point in history. Not that we shouldn't tell her story, but she's one of many.
Yeah, we've done her. We've done her, and there are others we can also do.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So it's one of the things. It's like in Christians deal with the whole, you know, if God good and powerful, why all of this gestures at everything. And the typical answer, and I don't think it's a terrible answer. Like, I think I find it, like, not completely satisfying, but I do find it answers, you know, generally my angst and questions about it, you know, is twofold. One is that God created people to love and be loved by, and love has to involve some kind of free agency, free will, because if not, you know, again, it's love that's coerced is not love. Love that is, you know, is you don't have any free choice but to love is not love. And so he has to some degree give human beings free will. And so we do evil in the world, and we do evil, and that started out with the first humans. However you want to conjecture what you call it, the Adam and Eve story, whether that's history, mythos, or mytho-history, as William Lane Craig likes to put it. But it's, again, started out with the first humans. And of course, this process also did damage to the natural world, which is, even in Jewish scholars I've read, you know, take that as like, I think there's, you know, the violence done against humans as violence to the natural world.
Cain killed Abel.
Well, also, like, and even the Cain Abel story is like, you know, it did harm to the earth, and like in the Noah state, it says the violence did harm to the earth, which talks about is sort of explanation for natural disasters, however you want to talk about that. And so I find that's the typical Christian answer that's given, and I find that answer pretty satisfying, not on an emotional level, but on an intellectual level. Yeah. And so. Is that a common sort of explanation that is given sort of in Reformed Jewish tradition, or does that not kind of does nobody really find that very compelling?
In my personal experience, it's the second one. So it's just kind of like, when you pitch those kind of things, that makes sense. But back, like, you know. Right. The Holocaust is in such recent memory and such directly targeted towards the Jewish people that they're just like, what about that one time? So that's kind of like...
Yeah, so it's kind of like, okay, you can say that, but like, it's like, it's, you know, but like God, you really, let us get.
Yeah, so we've had a Holocaust speakers speak to us before at the temple.
Yeah.
And I remember, just as a contrast of how, people might be removed, is I was very quiet until my senior year of high school. So I never said anything. I was paying attention. I love stories, so I'm sure that was keeping my attention. But two of the other girls were playing, switching shoes and playing around, and the congregation was pissed, and they were yelling and just yelling at them, and yelling at us as a class, and I was just I paid attention, but
no, I get that.
Come on, guys, don't
yeah, people can be too uptight about that sort of thing. Yeah.
No, it's not. No, I'm to be clear, I'm casting shade at the other girls who are messing around while they got a Holocaust survivor to talk about his personal story in person.
That's fair. No, that's fair to be upset about that. So the what is it? Oh, it made me think of another piece of this. Oh yeah. So it's interesting to me. Another aspect of this that to me is interesting is the interplay between Jewish people being a culture as well as religion, and they talk about this again. They deal with this in the movie. They don't do a dissertation on it, but you can see this as an interplay that happens. They do, and it's funny. It's they do talk about God sort of as if he's real in the movie. And one of the things that's interesting is, I've always found it interesting that there are Christians. I'm in Christian communities, and there are Christians who, sometimes will go to church, but they'll kind of they'll call themselves Christians, but we don't really believe that there's a God. We don't really believe that any of this happened. We don't really believe. But the result of that is typically the denominations that have that attitude that is kind of this is good for community, but we don't really believe it. Those tend to die fairly quickly. They have the most kind of they bleed the most members the fastest. You find the progressive and the mainline denominations of Christianity, they tend to they basically they're almost non-existent. They've been losing members over the decades really fast. It tends to be the denominations where they actually believe that Jesus Christ did rise bodily from the dead and there was a virgin birth, and and so that is these ones, and that makes sense to me because it's okay, if you're gonna believe this, maybe you should actually believe it. Otherwise, what's the point? And one of the things that's fascinating to me about the Jewish community is it's less that way. It's not entirely not that way, but it is less that way. You do find a lot, even more so than in Christian communities, you find a lot of people who are going to be culturally Jewish, without actually believing that there's a God or that you kind of really want to have a relationship with him. And it seems odd to me. It's okay, why would you spend all this time memorizing the Torah, reading, if you don't believe it's actually true, even in a some of these stories are metaphors, but God's actually real and he wants us to learn this stuff. It's if God didn't actually come down to the prophets and say, hey, you guys got to learn this stuff, what would be the point of being Jewish in a meaningful sense? And that, but again, that's my sort of, goy perspective on it. How do you see other people within your tradition interacting with that? Because you said Reformed is a little bit more on the spectrum of more likely to say maybe, maybe not. How do you see other people interacting with that in your communities, and how do you interact with that personally?
Okay, well, as many Jewish comedians can protest to, it's much more open. It's not a closed secret that people that are Jewish kind of fight with it. The rabbis fight with it. It's it is a accepted part of the 5 stages of grief, essentially. So the rabbis are just happy that people are showing up, and B, make it more about like, well, this is the Torah, this is the Torah thing, this is the Torah portion for the week, because you read it over the Jewish calendar essentially, and you have different. That's how the holidays,
right?
And the Jewish calendar is lunar based versus so that's why Hanukkah is always on a different week.
Gotcha. Okay.
So fun fact. Fun fact. But so it's more just about people showing up and vibing, and then especially with the changing of the world, Jewish people are just known to be more open because they ask those intellectual questions. So and then so if there's other people in need that aren't Jewish, like the temple has a nice little what is it? A homeless shelter on site that they run, and they use donations to run. So that's good. That's kind of the point. But they drug test people and stuff.
So
like
of course,
that. Yeah. I don't know, but I think it's also just to tell the Nazis to suck it, because especially with a lot of that. The political climate can be tricky sometimes, especially in the last 5 or 6, 4 years.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, the fact that we're still going despite everything is kind of a statement in itself, and that's what people kind of get invested in,
Okay.
Like a fun cutaway that I always tell people is that Christmas didn't used to be as secular as it was. And then Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was invented by a Jewish person to help with that. And I love Rudolph. I'm the biggest Rudolph simp. I love Rankin Mask. And it was frustrating to not be able to celebrate that growing up because, I didn't grow up as big of a Jewish community as this protagonist did, and to kind of have to pick one or the other.
Absolutely. White Christmas, almost all of the great songs, one of the great stories of sort of the Christmas, like Charles Dickens kind of invented our modern version of Christmas. And then, in American culture, because, most of the entertainers were Jewish, and they were kind of figuring, hey, there is a version of Christmas that can be for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's more of a staple in and Manhattan and New York in general, because there's just a higher Jewish population in general. So people are just naturally more tolerant, accepting, because they're actually having to interact with Jewish people and not just hear about them like they're unicorns,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Like from old history,
like when you went to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. So there is. That's interesting. I guess that one interesting things about it is that the Jewish identity is both, cultural, and it is, to some degree ethnic, but it's cultural and it's religious, and the religion is so tied to the cultural that, to hold on to the cultural, you sort of do have to hold on to the religious rituals at least. And so that is kind of keeping the religious rituals as a part of the culture as you're holding on to the culture. It's kind of like a snake eating its tail thing, is what I would like. Even there's an episode of House that I can't remember the name of the episode. It's when House is dating the female doctor who's also Jewish and has to go to the dinner. And I don't know. I don't watch House. I'm just using Dr. Lady. So Dr. Lady is like, come to my Jewish dinner. And House is like, I'm not Jewish. And then I think the mom is like, neither is anyone here, Yeah. No, I can see it. Okay, very cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Any other things that you would like people to know if they've watched the movie, or if they've not watched the movie that we haven't brought up that you would like to let people know before we sign off?
Let me think. I'm thinking as I scratch my eye. It's just not a good movie. It's just like
what are better movies that represent Jewish life and culture that people should watch instead?
That's the whole point of Adam Sandler's career. There's not a lot.
There's 8 crazy nights, you know.
That's all we got. And it's as an animator, it makes my heart hurt. If I can, someone
there's a very possible Christmas episode.
yeah. That's not even Christmas. That's like there's Hanukkah's mentioned there.
Hanukkah's mentioned, yes.
Anyway, I wish there was a Kim Possible Hanukkah episode. It would save me so much trouble. I have some good ones. So Rugrats does some great Jewish stories because Tommy is half Jewish on his mother's side, so they do a good over episode and a good Hanukkah episode.
Okay.
So with fun little subplots, about that. We were talking about this yesterday, but yes. The Ghost and Molly McGee and Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur also have bar mitzvah themed episodes.
Yeah, check those out, like on YouTube. Just those names and bar mitzvah, something that.
Yeah, they're bat mitzvahs. They're both female characters. If that helps with your search engine terms, but those were much better stories, frankly, because they were about like the whole beat of this movie is about friendship conflict, but like it's just like this. There's a scene where one of the main characters is indirectly embarrassing her friend at the bar mitzvah or her bat mitzvah, and it's incredibly painful. And I made a comparison that this is like Carrie, but not as fun, because it's just like it's coming, but it's just like you don't have any payoff at the end. It's just like cringe.
Cool.
So,
all right. So do check those out. Phil, thank you so much for joining me to educate myself and everyone else who is watching / listening to this. And thank you for dolling yourself up for the video portion of this.
If you were my friend, I would have been like, I'm doing this later.
No, I very much appreciate it. If people want to find you and follow your content, where can they go?
So I love Kim Possible a lot on the internet.
That's her name. She also loves Kim Possible, but yes.
Yeah, that's my stage name. We'll say that. So that's why on my if you're listening or you're watching me on camera, that's why my little slash is KP, because that's a short version of my username. So it's I love spelled LOVE Kim Possible a lot. We haven't put out some main channel content in a hot second because of life things I can't really help, but there's some stuff coming. Trust me, we work very hard. I'm most active on Twitter. I live KP a lot on Twitter. I have a fan server that you can find on my LinkedIn on Twitter, as well as my business email. Like, I'm pretty open for this kind of stuff. Assuming you're actually a business and not just like some random person. I have my own podcast called Animation Communication with a K. It's on YouTube and it's on all the streaming platforms. And that's generally it. The Discord server is probably the best place if you're interested in like meeting some cartoon friends or, wanting to use that as community if you're kind of a little isolated. So,
very cool.
Christian moms in there, that'd be fun to get.
I still have, she's still trying to drag me into Discord, and I'm still old manning it, trying to figure out how to use that well. But yeah, if you're a youngster, you're a Zoomer, and or Gen Alpha, and you're.
I technically have a TikTok for all the Gen Alphas or whatever.
Do you?
It's it's just at I Love Kim Possible app, but I don't use it that often because TikTok owns everything you put on there, and that makes me, that's kind of sus.
Yeah, so. That's fair. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, if you want to follow me, and I'm on all the socials as well, usually with some normal guy in there, because that's
his brand.
When I started these social media platforms, that's what I was calling myself. And then I'm also, like I said, culture critic for Religion Unplugged. You can also find me on my podcast, The Overthinkers, on wherever you find podcasts, and the overthinkersjournal.com. And search my name elsewhere. You'll find some other places I've written stuff. But yes, thank you so much, Rachel, for joining, and thank you all for joining.
One more plug. Yes. You want to tell them about the No Way Home video?
Is that up?
It's not up yet, but it will come up soon.
So we're working on a collab video about Spider-Man No Way Home, and the way that's, opened up and changed how superhero movies are made in ways that people don't quite appreciate, and fan and creator relations and such.
Yeah, so I don't have a deadline for that, but maybe like in the next 2 or 3 months. So
cool. Yeah, no, so we're excited. We put a lot of work into that. Rachel put a lot of work into that. We're very excited.
Long script, but it should turn out really well, hopefully.
Yes. All right. Anyway, yes. So thank you so much for joining us. And as always, this is Religion Unplugged podcast for your regular religion and news and culture plug-in.